Hello and welcome to MBTV. My name is Damon and I'm an MBTI Master Practitioner. I prefer INTJ. Today you and I are going to discuss the common mistype between INTJ and INFJ. It is an easy mix-up, to be honest, because often they reach very similar conclusions. However, the process they use to reach these conclusions are often very different. I'm going to attempt to shy away from the behavioral tendencies because these tendencies tend to box types in and assist in forming inappropriate stereotypes that may not be applicable in all situations. Types are very different. We have to understand that. Both of these types use the combination of NISE, which means they prefer introverted intuition as their primary perception process and extroverted sensing as an impetus to further explore the insights of their introverted intuition. Both of these types can appear very logical and also incredibly contained. In my experience working with professional typing many people, what I have seen is that most people rule out the possibility of being INFJ because they are too logical, which often has been very false. Or they rule out INTJ because they can be too emotional. For those of you who have struggled with this mistype, you're definitely not alone. There is a lot of people who go through this. This complexity furthers in this type misunderstanding as we understand that these functions are encased in individual and collective archetypes, and behavior is not a reliable indicator to determine cognitive preferences when it comes to the functions. What this means is that functions will manifest differently in each person regardless of type. FI would look different in one INTJ compared to another INTJ. So we're going to look at things a little bit differently. We're going to look at the orientation of their auxiliary and tertiary processes as they share the same dominant and inferior function. Alright, so when we analyze the relationship between extroverted thinking and introverted thinking, we discover something highly distinguishing between these two types. The difference in orientation of their logic is so vast, it's almost an instant identifier of that difference. When the introverted thinking function is applied in the INFJ, you find that it is more concerned with classification, categorization, and prioritization and analysis, working alongside a more apparent and more dominant extroverted feeling function. It assigns the proper classification and criteria to human relationships and emotions. For this reason, you may see the INFJs heavily interested in philosophy or politics. They may have an almost unexplainable need and desire to fully understand what implications certain actions have on people or a culture or even themselves. They usually have a very strong logical database supporting their moral convictions and emotions. In other words, they're less concerned with application and more concerned with understanding the logic behind positions of emotions, ethics, values, or cultural norms, or shared values. Another way you could look at this is that the same force that the INTJ applies to the real world of action and getting things done, the INFJ applies internally and consistently to refine their own understanding of information as it pertains to the human condition. The extroverted thinking function in the INTJ primarily appears to be more concerned with setting measurable and attainable goals in terms of resources available and the steps needed to accomplish said goals. They strive for efficiency in the process and will quickly let go of the INFJ's preferred mental models if they do not fit the current situation or the established objective goals. INTJs are more interested in cutting out the inapplicable information in favor of efficiency, utilization of resources, and reaching performance standards. When it comes to logic, their focus is outside of self, concerned with weighing all things, including people, up against the established metric, rules, or procedures. They generally attempt to remove modeling and have the belief that things change in the moment, and forcing something to fit into a mental model may be a limiting way to approach a problem in the real world and keep it practical. This relentless drive to conclude their insights is what gives INTJs their stereotypical drive to accomplish things in the external world, which takes precedent over even logical consistency. Now, it may sound like I'm implying that the INFJ is actually more analytical than the INTJ, but this is simply not true. Both of these types have profound insights generated by their introverted intuition. However, between the two types, these insights are analyzed in a completely different way. So we've got to get into that mindset. The INTJ will have a certain realization and immediately turn to the external world to confirm its validity. They aim tirelessly to prove it to be true, using external and often observable logical criteria, and refer to that ahead of their mental models. For example, the INTJ may get a gut feeling that a friend is pregnant, and they now must confirm their suspicion objectively. In this example, the INTJ may make it a personal quest to seek external confirmation or elimination, and often just avoid asking the person altogether. They undoubtedly analyze and drill down every piece of external evidence they can find to either support or eliminate their insight. They may feel incredibly uncomfortable talking to their friend in this particular situation because of unexpected human variables. They may be completely unaware of cultural and personal values, and if they happen to be aware of these values, they tend to be paralyzed at evaluating those values effectively to determine the best approach that's appropriate for that person. This may cause them to default how they themselves would prefer to be approached, hence the introverted feeling. And as we know, the preferred directness of TE can often be seen as socially inappropriate and abrasive. INTJs who are aware of this may choose just not to risk it and avoid the person altogether, and the ones who are not aware of this generally ask bluntly and directly at the risk of causing offense to the person, even if it's their friend. However, an INTJ who has learned from these experiences may very well know how to approach the friend, but it's done through the evaluation of what has worked in the past and what works currently, and generally not through the evaluation of what is most appropriate given that particular circumstance. That being said, even developed INTJs struggle adapting to cultures where a completely opposite approach is necessary and warranted. The INFJ may have a similar realization, but their priority rests on the application, not as if it pertains to what is true and not true, but what is most appropriate given the circumstances in that particular situation, being very objective, often abandoning their insight altogether if it comes at a cost of putting the relationship at risk. However, with a developed tertiary function, the INFJ can easily recruit their own mental models to determine the validity of the insight while not actually needing or seeking objective proof, but proofing it internally. They deconstruct the insight to identify any criteria or classification, and once discovered, they can add it to their understanding. This is important for INFJs. The key word here is understanding. However, this approach can often work against them, as they are often not sure of their subjective logical reasoning behind what they feel is most appropriate. For this reason, the INFJs may have a more difficult time explaining their insights in comparison to the INTJ. Their logical insights, that is, of course. Using the same example with the pregnant friend, the INFJ may take her friend's cultural and personal orientation into account before asking her if she's pregnant, as confirmation falls second to appropriateness. Even if the curiosity is present, they might actually still do it, but they may know it's wrong. So we got to look at behavior this way. They use their logical database to search for the proper category of approach using external values as the primary ruling criteria, easily picking up which box or category from where to pull the proper approach. Depending on the INFJ's values, they may abandon the search altogether, as they may rule that it's not even their business to know in the first place. This variation all depends on the value system adopted by the INFJ. In summary, the INFJ is less concerned with proving ideas of validity and applicability and more concerned with the potential of the idea when it comes to the effect on human relationships and their interpersonal relationships, as well as shared values. They seem to know what model to use when the situation has the right classifiers, using their strong introverted thinking companion. The INTJ is less concerned with the appropriateness of truth and more focused on the outer fulfillment of their inner ideals crafted by their FI counterpart, while maintaining what works in the real world and its practicality. The INTJ's FI is best expressed through their stubbornness to conform to any standard in which they do not believe is consistent with their own values. Well-developed INTJs can appear so morally convicted that they may appear as INFJs. So what you should look for is how they came to such moral convictions, not the conviction itself. Very important here, how they came to it, the process. These are cognitive processes. All this being said, the INFJ is not sufficiently exposed to life circumstances that encourage the understanding of human potential or shared values. They may appear just as abrasive as an INTJ. I can't stress this enough. The behavior is not what we're looking at here. It's the process, the cognitive process. So it's better to judge by determining what they prefer in terms of these cognitive processes than to actually look at the end result behavior. The INFJ's extroverted feeling cannot operate effectively without a strong introverted thinking backbone. Just like the INTJ's extroverted thinking can have rather detrimental human consequences without the consideration of their introverted feeling framework. These judgment functions, when appropriately developed, lead to more effective decision making in both types. It's important that we develop both judgment functions. So before we move on to the next point, if you wish to further understand these cognitive functions in detail, check out our channel's MBTI Cognitive Function series, where I go into depth on each of these functions and how they play a role in the total type dynamic. Also, if you like the content, feel free to click that subscribe button. All right, when it comes to the state of emotions in each type, one of the largest indicators is the INTJ's denial of emotions. They naturally believe that all things in the external world should remain objective, and the subjectivity of their own emotional state should remain internal, so they can't compromise the ordered consistency of the external world. In comparison, the INFJ may also contain their own emotions, but the reasons can vary from lack of trust to insecurity to containment. However, when these bridges are crossed, they generally have an amazing ability to express their emotions rather authentically. So it's not the lack of skill here, it's lack of incentive. The INTJ has a very tense relationship with emotions. When it comes to their emotions, they often feel they are so powerful and overbearing that it's best not to express them at all. However, they are intensely aware of them, but not always really understanding them without some kind of competent introverted thinking. For this reason, when the INTJ attempts to explain their emotional state using whatever external objective data they can compare to it, it can wind up being very confusing, muddled, and the listener may be highly confused. When it comes to the emotions of other people, INTJs may view them as obstacles that get in the way of the truth. So these emotions must be removed as quickly as possible. So here in this example, the INTJ is removing emotions from the environment. The INFJ generally has a much healthier relationship with their own emotions, feeling them intensely and not only having the ability to express them, but to effectively analyze them with their introverted thinking function. This works really well for the INFJ, and they generally have a very strong understanding of their emotions as well as the values and the emotions of the other people without even thinking twice about it. They build a large introverted thinking network of understanding emotions and values of others, but often at the cost of losing touch with their own internal principles and values, molding to the models they've created for outer harmony and often completely sacrificing self in the process. You won't generally see this from the INTJ, who can also value harmony, but not at the expense of their own ideals. So as you can see, this is much more complex than F versus T, emotional versus logical, ethical versus forceful. It really boils down to how one reaches a decision or conclusion. What criteria is primarily used and what is most valued. So if you're struggling with this mistype, I hope this video has at least given you a step in the right direction to figure out this common confusion with many people. So thank you very much for watching this video. When you get the chance, make sure to spend some time on our forum if you have any further confusion on this particular topic. There's obviously much more than what I stated in this pretty short video to cover this very large topic. So anyway, I do appreciate you all and your contribution to MBTV. And thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you so much.
That their identity was worthless. So as a type 3, they want to feel they have some kind of worth. Now, since their own self has been rejected, they can't look within themselves to find worth like most people would. Because with most people, it's just, look within yourself. Just, try to find worth within your own self. For the type 3, they have rejected their self and its worth. And so, to look within their own self to find some